that the person would change within a day or two. It's going to take time until they would manage to get into a new system of friends, into a new system of, style, into a new system of perhaps uh, learning how to get out of that addiction. They might actually need to get into
changing the environment.
absolutely. It's not within a snap. It actually needs to take some time. And definitely, when you deal with these people, you basically have to recognize that there are some people that have better training in dealing with these people, learning how to talk to them, letting them, I guess, absorb the whole fatwa or absorb in different spaces, support groups, etc. Those are important before we sometimes think that I can grab a fatwa from a book and just tell them, well, this is what Islam says, and you think they're going to be ready to embrace it. They're not ready to embrace it yet. You have to just recognize that these people are taking baby steps in their Islam. All right, so let's go ahead, inshallah, with
please. What can I tell her if she called me and she said, do I have to separate from my husband, or what her situation is, just to live with
so I would tell her right now, take the baby steps of whatever you're capable of embracing in the religion. Take it and try to first situate yourself with new circle of friends. Let's start with that instead of a new husband, but new circle of friends. Try to learn the religion, because by getting into this new circle of friends, learning the religion, little by little, that's going to help her grow in her deen and let her grow in, let's say, her practice and her awareness about the deen. And also let her learn how to pray, let her connect with that piece of it. And it's okay. Is that going to be something that I must be doing in the future? Yes, but whenever you're ready, don't leave the religion because you feel that's too much of a, I guess, a big jump for you. If it's too big of a jump for you, you don't leave the religion. Don't get out of Jannah. Okay. If it's too big of a leap for you, that's all right. You can stay Muslim and still be married to your non-Muslim husband whenever you're ready. This isn't to mean that that's permissible, but this is to mean that whenever you're ready to embrace the ruling and work on growing in your Islam, you can decide which leap you're ready to take down the road, whether it's maybe perhaps leave the lifestyle that you're living, maybe wear hijab, maybe get basically separated from your husband. Then you would have to, see what steps you're ready to take for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Till that time,
right. So it's very important to also help her understand that the reason why we've got the sins and let's call them the sins and the haram and the halal, etc. Those are not necessarily just boundaries. Do not cross, do not make. No, it's an issue of, it's a spiritual elevator and a spiritual denouncer. In other words, if you get into a spiritual denouncer, which probably is you staying in a relationship with a non-Muslim man, for example, in this case, well, you're probably going to not realize that that's going to be at the expense of probably down the road, your husband is probably going to pressure you. You're going to probably want to adapt to his way. And then without you realizing, it's going to be at the expense of probably your own religion, your own faith. So Islam will tell you these spiritual denouncers because Islam will tell you what and how to guard your faith. So it's not an issue of, a list of do's and don'ts, but this is to help you recognize what gives you that booster of faith and what actually would sometimes suck your faith and probably take you down without you realizing. So
And
sometimes,
what about the issue with when there's children involved?
when the children are involved, it depends on what age they are. So if she's capable of talking to the children, that would be great. But of course, if it depends on where she's living, because in some countries, if you were to probably talk to your children about Islam, this could be illegal. Okay, so it depends on what country you're in. You're going to do your best in order to probably bring the children into Islam. But of course, it's easier said than done in some countries, in some situations. So we'll just say, do your best and لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. That's it.
I already bring her the children to the mosque in Sunday school.
Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes they come to my halaqat, and she has 12, 9, 7 years.
Okay. So 12, 9, and 7, they they would usually be attached to their mom, but do expect changes at certain ages, probably 14, 15. That's when they start wanting to, I guess, go into a revolution and basically try to get a different system of social acceptance, a different system of friends, and definitely Islam, has a number of different regulations on how to protect your deen. So for a 14-year-old, the society is not going to be very helpful in helping them maintain their deen. So that becomes problematic at age 14, 15, but we're going to continue, inshallah. Basically, as at the end, as far as they can go, that's the only thing that you can do. I mean, we have people that were born Muslim, leave their religion and get into that struggle. So you're just going to continue, basically do your best to maintain their deen, do your best to teach them the religion, do your best to basically preserve your family as well. So probably making extra da'wah for your husband, maybe letting him get to know the masjid, getting to know probably the Quran, having that conversation, and try to enlighten him about this. And subhanAllah, you just never know when that hidayah comes in.
Yeah. But a clear answer. What can I answer her if she asked me about should I sleep with my husband or what?
Like I said, tell her, the religion says in general, the religion says that you cannot be intimate with your husband. But if you feel that this is not a leap you're ready to take yet, I'll tell you, work on your religion, work on staying within faith and grow. And whenever you're ready to take that, take it. If you just want to work on your salah right now and work on learning the deen right now, so take the baby steps whenever you're ready to take that step and you're ready to practice that particular ruling, well, that would be great. That way, you're not changing the interpretation to suit, I guess, the listener's desires. And at the same time, you're letting her know, that she can still be Muslim and work on those steps whenever she's capable of, I guess, embracing this or that particular ruling. Then that would be something that let her decide. So you're letting her decide rather than you decide and determine for her. You're letting her decide what steps she should be taking and what steps she's capable of leaping into, rather than you forcing her and telling her this is what you have to do. This is what I realized. One thing is that a lot of reverts, it's a turnoff when you act as the mentor that is dictating everything in their life and treating them like they're stupid. And that you're basically, hey, divorce your husband, get into this, stand over here. It's a turnoff, because even if the person is a new Muslim, you have to recognize that they still have, I guess, their own pride. So you don't want to act as, the mentor, and basically stand there to make them feel that, that you're controlling their life, you're controlling the decisions that they're making, and that she has to right now just submit to you. And then she's really confused whether you really are aware of the deen, and you really know the religion properly. And then she starts, getting into that confusion. So I would really say, well, this is what I would know. You can do further research, even if you had a PhD in Islamic studies. If it's a new Muslim, let them say, this is what I know. This is what you can research. There are these different resources. You can talk and call this scholar. This person is more scholarly. That person's more scholarly. Please, call whoever you think is probably more scholarly and probably would make more sense for you. And that way, instead of you dictating for them, you're letting them feel that they're doing their own research and basically having the resources rather than you dictating what the ruling is, giving them the resources, making them feel that it's their own research and not you dictating your ideas. Because it can feel very uncomfortable for, certain communities I would say are more sensitive in this regards than other communities. So, just keeping that one in mind, just giving them the resource and say, well, you can go ahead and do your research, and whenever you're ready to take that step, take it. This is what I would recommend, just to basically.
Yeah, sounds good. It's fair. Jazakallah khair.
All right. So we were supposed to be doing ليس على الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات جناح فيما طعموا إذا ما اتقوا وآمنوا وعملوا الصالحات ثم اتقوا وآمنوا ثم اتقوا وأحسنوا والله يحب المحسنين. And we said that there are nine different issues that al-Qurtubi said he was going to discuss. And number one, we went into details for the reason for the revelation, and we talked about that the ayat were revealed, basically the previous ayah, which basically is this one, فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ, basically marking the final statement. Had you really made the final, the final finish that alcohol is basically haram, and that was going to be the end of it? On what else? And of course, we went in details in that regards, and we also said the reaction. So they were concerned, well, what about the people that had died not knowing that that was going to be the final ruling? And certainly the ayat were basically letting them know that not because somebody had been probably drinking before or engaging in certain haram, Islam is still in the gradual, the process of a gradual revelation. So basically in that situation, those that had practiced Islam based on, let's say, the previous way, they would not be held accountable for the ayat that were abrogated later on. So for those people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically revealed that those people that had basically died not practicing this ruling will not be held accountable for something that was revealed later. Okay, let's see. Al-Bukhari narrated, and we said the story about the reaction of the different Sahaba when this ayah was revealed, that is Anas ibn Malik. And you want to keep in mind, Anas ibn Malik is actually related to Abu Talha, because Sulaym, let's look at the story. Okay, so Sulaym basically had two children. Okay, Sulaym, her family had become Muslim, her sister Haram, and they they were basically, and her father, her brothers, they all embraced Islam. They were the first family to embrace Islam, by the way, as a whole. But their husbands didn't embrace Islam. And because their husbands didn't embrace Islam, one basically fled to Syria or Lebanon. At the time, it was all called Bilad al-Sham. So basically fled to Syria because he wanted to basically get away from all of this and the Islamic influence. So that actually left Sulaim, of course, right now, single parent with 2 kids. That is Anas. Anas is one of them. And then, of course, later, she basically sees Abu Talha. Abu Talha was not Muslim, by the way. Abu Talha is right there, and she was just having some kind of a conversation with Abu Talha, and that conversation was really short, but she just said, you know, Abu Talha, you're a person that any woman would be really interested in getting married to if only you were Muslim. If you were to convert to Islam, that would be my mahar. So he goes and learns about the deen and converts to Islam. He becomes Muslim. She gets married to him. So Abu Talha would be considered the stepdad for Anas. Okay? The stepdad for Anas. And Anas ibn Malik was right there. كنت ساقي القوم في منزل أبي طلحة. He said, I was basically, I guess, the bartender. Okay? He was basically passing out the drinks for everyone that was gathering at Abu Talha's home. And that's when the ayah was revealed in regards to the prohibition of alcohol. And that's when, of course, the Prophet ﷺ was sending out those announcers to announce that alcohol is right now regarded as forbidden, and therefore you would basically have to make your final thing, and which is فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ. Had you made the final decision that this was going to be the end of it? And that's when you saw that Anas ibn Malik, Abu Talha just sends out Anas, go and see what this announcement is in regards to. He goes out and he says, well, the announcement is basically saying that al-khamr is now regarded as prohibited. So he said, just go and just dump it. So he goes and dumps it, and it was actually considered from the expensive kind, but still goes and dumps it. Okay. So we went in details in that regards and what actually happens and to those people. So in other words, they're not held accountable. Then we went into this one. So this ayah actually has a clear announcement and a clear evidence that any drink that is basically, whether we're speaking about the juice or the drink basically that is fermented to basically get into the point of being an alcoholic beverage, then that would make it haram, regardless of what substance it comes from. Okay, so that's basically a text right there. And we cannot object to any of this because we could say that all the Sahaba, that's what they understood. They understood that if we're speaking about any substance, any drink that was fermented and that contains alcohol, then in that situation, that would be considered haram. And certainly whether it was made of dates, whether it's made of grapes, barley, whatever it's made of, it actually takes the same ruling. Okay. And we could see that Jabir ibn Abdullah, he basically narrated off the Prophet ﷺ that whether we're speaking about raisins, whether we're speaking about dates, all of them would be considered, of course, even whether it's soaked with water or whether it was cooked, if it got fermented and went into the stage of basically getting and some amount of alcohol, then that would actually be making it haram. And we know that there is a hadith that is authentic that Umar ibn al-Khattab, who basically was definitely, now I want you to look at the word khamara. So the word khamara, which basically is right there, khamr, that's basically talking about the actual object, but khamara is basically the verb, okay? The actual process that is, okay? So if something basically goes through the process of fermentation to containing an amount of alcohol, well, that means whether when we quote Umar ibn al-Khattab, he basically stood on the Prophet's minbar, on the minaret, basically, and said, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, that the ala innahu qad nazala tahrimul khamri yawma nazal. The ayah that was revealed in regards to the final statement, in regards to, of course, prohibiting and forbidding alcohol, it was revealed on the day of revelation. And those things that are considered as part of khamr, whether it was from grapes, dates, honey, wheat, or even barley. And basically here al-Qurtubi wants to say وَالْخَمْرُ مَا خَامَرَ الْعَقْلِ. If we look at the word khamara, it's to get fermented to the level of having an alcohol. And if that alcohol is basically within any of these substances, and if it basically can cause the person to get intoxicated, well, that's what the root and the verb khamara is to mean. It's basically to mean just that. And of course, there is a rather, I guess, why was he even getting into this debate? Well, he was getting into this debate because there is a Hanafi and al-Kufiyin, basically some of the Hanafis and basically some scholars that lived in al-Kufa. Al-Kufa was and still is a city in Iraq, and they basically said that al-Khamr would be basically only from بأن الخمر لا تكون إلا من العنب. That's the point that they were trying to make. They said khamr would only be exclusive to a drink that is made from grapes. In other words, they said if it was made of another substance, whether we're speaking about dates, barley, wheat, apples, whatever it is, they said that is not khamr. What would it be? They said it's called nabidh. It's not called khamr. So by basically saying that, you're going to say that khamr would only, or alcohol is only exclusive to wine that is made of grapes and not other substances. But here's one thing. I would like to say that yes, this debate is there, but still the madhab Hanafi, and even those that had basically differentiated between khamr and nabidh, and certainly they still agreed that if it gets fermented to the level of having alcohol, even if it's made of any other plant or any other I guess substance, if it got fermented to the level of having alcohol, that would actually be considered haram and it would be considered khamr. But they were just, I guess, getting into, well, is that really khamr, or is this considered nabidh because it takes longer to ferment, etc. And certainly, right there, al-Qurtubi wanted to lay out, I guess, the misconception and certainly the mistake that al-Hanafi madhab had fallen into. So he basically says, well, Imam Abu Abdullah al-Maziri. I want to talk about Abu Abdullah al-Maziri for a bit. Abu Abdullah al-Mazari was basically a scholar from Tunisia. He was a Maliki scholar. Believe it or not, his nickname was called al-Dhaki, the smart one. He was extremely smart. Okay, he had a couple books, and the most important book is basically a sharh explaining the hadith in Sahih Muslim. Okay, he said, quote, majority of the scholars from the past and others had basically said everything that intoxicates, regardless basically of what substance it's made of, is basically going to be considered haram to consume, whether the amount was small or whether the amount was big, whether that was made of raw plants or whether that was cooked, and that there's no difference between deriving it from grapes or any other substance, and that anybody that drinks from this would basically be held accountable and basically get into the punishment for drinking. As for the ones that were basically derived from grape juice, and we're talking about grape juice, he said there was a consensus that whether we're speaking about a small amount or a big amount, or whether we're speaking about a drop of it, it would all be considered as if it basically leads to intoxication. In other words, it fermented to the level of having alcohol, then in that situation, even if it's a drop, that would be considered haram, even if it's a drop. So the haram or the haram ruling, it's not dependent on the amount, it's basically the substance itself. Okay, so looking at that in the substance. All right. And of course, other than that, if we're talking about grape juice, let's say if it was not fermented, is that considered halal? Yes, if it's not fermented, it's halal. There's no problem with it. Okay. So here we go. He said, and certainly if we're speaking about it not reaching the level of course, that's now how are we going to judge whether it does contain an amount of alcohol or not? That's the question. All right. So it's so easy if we had a lab and basically the lab was giving us, I guess, kind of like, those tests, like the pregnancy test, you dip it inside and then it comes out as fermented alcohol is present or isn't present. We could probably do that, but not everybody has that tool. Okay. And of course, we're not going to be taking lab tests to make sure that this contains alcohol or not. And let's see. And that's why for the Hanafi madhab, they basically said, well, if the amount of fermentation, so now we're speaking about grape juice, but we're speaking about that it's going through the process of getting fermented, but the fermentation process during that time, it still didn't become absolute alcohol. Some of it probably did ferment to the level of having alcohol, and the other probably substance within that drink is really in that process. So that's what the Hanafis put into question. They put into question, well, if the person, yes, it probably is in the process. So they said, well, if it doesn't get to the person getting intoxicated, okay, and in that situation, they considered, well, it would be permissible because, in other words, it's not completely fermented, and therefore we wouldn't consider it as khamr. Okay, so I'm just just putting you within, I guess, this just to remove those misconceptions that many would lay out over there. Okay, so what about the substance, probably grape juice, that we would probably cook? I know that in Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, and Syria, I know we have this substance, this kind of a sweet thing. And you'll be so surprised to know what this sweet thing is. It's very common in al-Khalil. They really absolutely love it. It's called khabisa. I know it sounds really weird. It's like, I'm not sure I would want to try that. Let me explain to you how it's done. Okay, so we would basically get grape juice, and it has to be a specific grape juice. It's the sweet grape juice. They're the small grapes, not the big grapes. No, they're the really small grapes. They're really sweet. And then we would basically squeeze the juice out of them and then cook it. Basically, before it starts boiling, we would get semolina and then continue stirring as we put that semolina in it. And of course, the semolina is going to start, I guess, puffing, and that's what's going to make something very similar to Layali Lebanon, but instead of using milk and water, we're going to be now using that grape juice. Okay, so now we would then add pine nuts onto it, just small amount pine nuts, just basically just throw them in there and continue stirring. You don't even need to put any sugar because the grape juice sweetness is so sweet that you don't even need to put any sweetener on it. And then we would let it cool. And there you go. You got it right there. So they're basically served cold. And some people would probably like to add some nuts on it, etc. But that's basically what it is. I'm not really in favor of it, but some people are. It's very famous in Al-Khalil. There's another thing in Al-Khalil that we would, what was that called? Forgot what it was called. I used to hate it because that was the only sweet thing that they would pass. What was it called? Forgot what it was called. But anyhow, so it was
food or something to eat, like pudding.
no, it's not. We're not talking about a pudding. It's kind of like those, those Rolos. They would make it really. They would make it like a molasses, basically. They would continue cooking it until it becomes like a thick, or like a really thick, like a thick syrup type of thing. And then they would pour it on some surface and it would dry up and it becomes like, and they would sometimes put sesame in it and it becomes, is it sesame that they put in it? And it becomes like those Rolos. So kind of, like those gummies that people would eat.
Mm-hmm.
It would become like a gummy, but it's like a sheet of gummy.
Mm-hmm.
You guys don't do it?
No, not in Lebanon. No. First
Not
time.
in Lebanon? Okay. Even though I saw it, I did see it in Tarablus.
Oh.
I did see it in Tarablus. For sure, I saw it in Tarablus. Yeah, for sure, I saw it in Tarablus. I forgot what it was called in Palestine. It's definitely not something that I love, but Palestinians are obsessed with it. And of course, from grape juice, they would also make the actual grapes. They would do jam, grape jam, and they would do grape. It would be, I don't know what it's called, but they put them in these containers. Let me see. I know that doesn't help.
Dibbits. Molasses, like dibbits?
Molasses. There you go. Molasses is basically made of that. But then, of course, it requires a lot of stirring. So, right, they would also do molasses. So does that mean everything that we would cook from grapes is basically considered as haram? The answer is no, unless it fermented. Okay. So you could use that. But if you leave it, so let's say right there, he said, if we're speaking about raisins, and we're soaking raisins in water, okay? And we're speaking about, of course, just raw raisins, soaking them in water and basically, and then probably cooking that water that we had raisins basically going in it. And whether we're cooking it or whether we're talking about raw raisins, and whether we're soaking it in water, unless it fermented. But if it didn't ferment, then it would be halal. Unless, like I said, unless it fermented and it became alcoholic, then that's basically what would determine and making it haram. Okay, Abu Hanifa basically considered that what is haram is exclusive to taking it from the different plants, coming from the palm trees, and even grapes. And of course, that's why he was considering that the grape juice, whether it's a small amount or a big amount, unless it was cooked to a certain level to probably maybe evaporating 2/3 of it. So we're talking about 2/3 of it right now, 2/3 of the amount had already evaporated. He considered that that means it went through the process of fermentation. So that's when he would consider that that would be impermissible. So what are we talking about? Molasses right here? It's molasses then. Let's see. As for the raisins, dates, if we were to cook them, in other words, we soaked them in water, then we basically cooked that water. And I know that in Yemen, in Duwar al-Khalij, the different Gulf countries, they actually make some sweets out of that. They would continue in Sudan, I believe, as well. Am I right? They would have it's like this huge container, and they would continue and stirring it and continue to stir it until it becomes like a halum type of thing, like the Turkish halqum sweet, those delights, those Turkish delights, basically. And in the Gulf countries, they would basically make a sweet out of this basically the dates that they would soak in water, and they would continue stirring it until it becomes hard. Well, not hardened, but until it becomes kind of like a pudding. Okay. And let's say if, of course, it doesn't reach the level of getting fermented, then that situation, it would be halal. Okay, let's see. وَأَمَّا النَّيْء مِنْهُ فَحَرَامٌ. Okay, so what is he saying? That in night, the raw ones are basically haram of zabib and tamir. If I would have, wait a minute. ولكنه مع تحريمه إياه لا يجب الحد فيه، وهذا كله ما لم يقع الإسكار. Oh, okay. فإن وقع الإسكار استوى الجميع. Okay. If we're okay. So what he's basically talking about, if we're speaking about the substance basically going through, even if it's raw, and basically went into that fermentation, that would be haram. And certainly if it doesn't ferment, then it would be permissible. But let me research that one again to see what the Hanafi madhab actually really said, rather than go through a secondary source for discussing al-madhab al-Hanafi, because this would be, that is in madhab Qurtubi. Al-Qurtubi is basically, not al-madhab Qurtubi, but al-Qurtubi is madhab Maliki. So to discuss what al-madhab Hanafi had said, we would not go to al-Qurtubi to tell us what al-madhab al-Hanafi had said. That's a secondary source. We would have to go to primary source, which basically is the Hanafi madhab books, to really tell us what al-Hanafi had said. Okay, let's see. And of course, Imam Abu al-Abbas. Who's Imam Abu al-Abbas? Imam al-Abbas is also from Qurtuba. Qurtuba is in Al-Andalus, all right? And he's different because Al-Qurtubi that we're studying his book, we're studying the book from, well, how do you say this? We're studying his book? Yeah. Is basically Abu Abdullah al-Qurtubi. Okay, let's see. He said it is really strange and ironic from those that would object to the opinion and say that the small amount from a small amount of juice and a small amount of alcohol, basically within grapes, is haram, and ككثيره وهو مجمع عليه. It's considering, remember that small amount when we said that for the Hanafis, they regarded that, well, if it's still in the process of fermenting, some of it might have fermented, the rest is not. So here he said, it's so strange how they could consider that a small amount of alcohol is haram, but then when they would discuss part of that, let's say, drink, was part of it was already starting to ferment into alcohol and the rest was not probably fully fermented. He said it is so strange how they're contradicting themselves, and even though they were the ones that also agreed that a small amount of alcohol is going to take the same ruling of a large amount of alcohol, it would still be considered haram. He said it's so ironic and basically contradicting themselves by saying, well, it would be halal if it's still in a container where some of it fermented and some of it didn't. And he said they're contradicting themselves, because we would know that whether we're speaking about a small amount or whether we're speaking about a large amount, it would still be considered as haram. And just because it basically had a different name, it doesn't necessarily mean that it takes a different ruling. As long as you recognize that it fermented and it contains an amount of alcohol, then that would basically mean that it would take the same ruling as alcohol, whether we're speaking about a small amount that probably is in the process of fermentation, or whether we're speaking about a large amount. If it's basically containing an amount of alcohol, it would be haram to drink. And this is important to keep in mind, because whether we're speaking about perhaps a certain percentage of alcohol, maybe you might have certain alcohol drinks, they'll tell you it just contains, let's say, 20% of alcohol or 30% of alcohol or 50% or whatever it is. So regardless of what percentage of alcohol there is in it, it would still be considered haram. Okay, just keep that one in mind, because I had a lot of people come forward and asking this question. So you might have some drinks, they'll have on them the percentage of alcohol, sometimes on the bottle itself, actually say 15, 20%, 25%, etc. And which basically, number one, it's cheaper. Number two, you can drink so much of it. If it's a person that is used to drinking, they wouldn't necessarily get intoxicated from that amount if they're used to drinking. So they could drink a bottle and still be alert. Okay. Versus someone else, they can probably drink, maybe get one shot and get basically intoxicated. It depends on, the amount that that person is, I guess, used to consuming. Okay. But at the end, the ruling is the same, whether it's a 20% alcohol, whether it's a 5%, as long as it contains an amount of alcohol that would actually make it haram. Okay. As long as it takes that amount. Okay, so that's what he basically wanted to say. He said, هذا القياس أرفع أنواع القياس. In other words, what is أرفع أنواع القياس? It's like the best of qiyas. It's like, yeah, it's the best analogy. If you are saying that the smallest amount of alcohol is basically forbidden to consume, then to look at, let's say, a whole maybe jug, and you recognize that some of it fermented and some of it didn't. In other words, 20% fermentation, that basically would let you know, use the analogy. If you considered that a small amount of alcohol is haram, and you're saying this is a 20% fermentation, it should basically just by a simple analogy, but basically let you know that that would basically be considered haram. And of course, objecting to Abu Hanifa, ثم العجب, you could see right there, I could see the anger in that word. And he said the strange thing that Abu Hanifa and his friends would basically get into heavily doing, I guess, deriving rulings from al-qiyas, an analogy, and even would consider it as a precedent over those statements that probably only had one person witnessing of that statement, but then they would basically leave such an analogy. That's what he's saying. Such an analogy that you can just need common sense to see. Basically, you could see right there. Okay, let's continue right there. طَعِمُ. I actually wanted to, what is the thing that I wanted to say? There was something else that I wanted to add in that regards. Subhanallah, I thought I would just delay it till I finish this point, and now it's gone. I forgot what the point was. It'll come, inshallah. All right, so let's go and continue the ayah right there. Where was it? Okay, here we go. ليس على الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات جناح فيما طعموا. So what is طعموا? Does this only mean that a person is basically consuming in food, or is this also including anything that is being consumed, whether we're speaking about drinks? Because the word comes from the root طعِمَ. The word طعِمَ basically means to eat. Let me write down the word. طعِمَ. Okay, this means to eat. Okay, but here, does that mean this is only talking about things that we eat, or is this also inclusive to anything that is being consumed? So it's basically anything that is being consumed, and it's not exclusive to food alone. Okay, let's see. You could see in what's the evidence? وَمَنْ لَمْ يَطْعَمْهُ بما فيه الكفاية. You could see that the ayah in 249, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically said, let's go to ayah 249 for a bit. This is page 132. And let's see in Surah al-Baqarah, what ayah does it say it was? 249. Okay. And then remember, this is page 132. We're going to go to Surah al-Baqarah 249 really quick. Is it Surah al-Baqarah? Is it? Yes. 249 really quick and get to that ayah in order for us to see. Okay, here we go. So here's ayah 249. Okay, here we go. فلما فصل طالوت بالجنود قال إن الله مبتليكم بنهر فمن شرب منه فليس مني ومن لم يطعمه فإنه مني. So of course, Talut was basically the leader. He was basically considered the leader, of course. And in that situation, he basically told them that is Bani Israel, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was basically going to, I guess, challenge them. And there's going to be an ibtila. They're not supposed to be drinking water, but here they were going to come across a river and they're going to be tempted to drink from it. And he said, whoever drinks from it, then this person is not amongst us. And whoever doesn't drink from it, and here's the word that was used, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَطْعَمْهُ. مَنْ لَمْ يَطْعَمْهُ, even though it involves drinking, okay, but it still used the word ta'am because it's an issue of consumption. Okay, so now that we would see this one, and regardless, of course, regardless of what the whole tafsir is, at least just this point help us see that yes, it can also be inclusive. And of course, if you would want to make any tafsir for the ayat, it's important to go to other ayat to make sure that you're not making your own interpretation. So he said, well, we would say that even though in Surah al-Baqarah it said وَمَنْ لَمْ يَطْعَمْهُ, even though it was so obvious that this is not talking about something being cooked, but this is actually talking about the consumption, and it was obvious. It was talking about إِنَّ اللَّهَ لكم بنهر. It wasn't some food, it wasn't some barbecue that they were going to come across, but they were going to come across a whole river, and that they were not supposed to be drinking from that river. Okay, let's continue right there. قال ابن خويزمنداد. خويزمنداد is basically from the Malikis. We talked about him before, from the Malikis in Al-Iraq. He said, what this ayah contained, it basically contained all the different things that were permissible and the different desires, and that it is permissible to make use of anything that is probably good, whether we're speaking about food, or whether we're speaking about drinks, or whether we're speaking about marriage. And even if it's let's say an expensive تنوهي في ثمن. In other words, even if it's too expensive, it's permissible to take. So if Noura is capable of affording, I don't know, a cake that's probably a $2,000 cake, well, good for you. That's what you are capable, and it's not going to be at the expense of your children's school and all of that. And you wanted to, I guess, pay a $2,000 cake for Yusuf's wedding, and to you that was important. Is it permissible to pay a $2,000 and buy a $2,000 cake? Yeah, it's a really good cake. It's a special cake, and it is made in a special place and all of that. It's permissible. It's permissible, but it's supposed to be, I guess, within your expense. In other words, making sure that it's not going to be at the expense of probably your children's schools, or probably your budget, and that it's going to basically be at the expense of other obligatory things that you have to take in consideration. But if you're capable of paying and buying a $2,000 cake, well, good for you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you rizq, and always a vast rizq. Allahumma ameen. All right. So same thing if we're talking about clothes. Let's say you basically have the money to probably buy $1,000 shoe. You've got the money, and it's within your budget, and you're a millionaire. Is it haram to buy $1,000 shoe? It's not haram. It's not haram. And same thing if we're talking about clothes, same thing if we're talking about food, and same thing if we're talking about wives. This man, basically rich, okay? And what do men basically want when they have the money? Well, yeah, cars, homes, and women. It's basically ABC, okay? Wants to get married to a second, a third, fourth wife. Is that haram? Does he have to have a reason? There doesn't have to be a reason. What? There doesn't have to be a reason to get married to a second wife? Yes, she doesn't have to be barren, or there's a war, etc. No, just for the desire of it, just wanting to get a second wife, that's basically permissible. What if the first wife doesn't want that? So at the end, he would have to do his homework, and I guess tatyib al-khatir, making her, feel good that she's not going to be ignored, etc. Just doing his homework, and basically giving her, I guess, the therapy, and that he's not basically disregarding you, and that you're beautiful, you're still the love of my life, you're still the woman that basically helped me get this far. I'm so thankful, but I would like to get married to a second wife. Is that halal? It is. Okay. But of course, on a condition that we're fulfilling the deen, the nafs, the aql, the mal, for basically the maintenance for basically the first wife and the first family. So this is to take it in consideration. Okay. So here we go. So whether, of course, let's say also wanted to not only get polygamous, but let's say they wanted to spend, I don't know, $200,000 on a wedding. Okay. That's definitely, let's just say these people are millionaires. They wanted to invite every single person in the city, and wanted to they had the money, all right, made it an open buffet, I guess, of mansaf and mandi and who knows what it is, and basically make it open for everyone because they've got the money. They just wanted everybody to be happy on that day. That's permissible. Okay, if they had the money, and definitely within that budget. Okay, let's see. لا تحرموا طيبات ما أحل الله لكم. That's basically, of course, in the comprehensive statement, that you're not supposed to regard something that is halal in its basically the general context. You cannot regard it haram if we're speaking about a bigger amount, unless we're speaking about التبذير in wandering money. That's a different story. So if we're talking about wandering money, that's a completely different issue. But if we're speaking about the actual substance, the amount of it would still be considered halal. Okay. إذا ما اتقوا وآمنوا وعملوا الصالحات ثم اتقوا وآمنوا ثم اتقوا وأحسنوا والله يحب المحسنين. So this is supposed to be, let's see, where are we at right now? So basically, just this part of the ayah. Let's look at it. إذا ما اتقوا, here we go. We're right now just taking this point. Before we were discussing this one, and now we're just discussing this one. Okay, let's talk about it. What did he want to comment? That is al-Qurtubi. He said, well, even though, let's look at the words, it said taqwa, ittaqaw, ittaqaw. How many times was that? And definitely amanu and amanu. Okay, let's see. So we got 3 times in that ayah basically said ittaqaw. And he said, well, number 1, there are 4 points that he wanted to point out in regards to this segment and this part of the ayah. He said, number 1 is that just because the word taqwa or ittaqaw was repeated, he said it doesn't really mean the same thing because we're talking about different context. So he said what this means in the first one, ittaqaw is basically that they had that, let's call it that religious integrity, religious commitment to abstain from drinking it, okay? And certainly believe that it was impermissible to drink. The second one, which is the second taqwa right there, is that it? Yeah, right there. That it would basically mean that they were consistent in their religious commitment and their faith. So the first one was in regards to their, they avoided drinking it and they believed that it was haram. In the second segment, that they were consistent in committed in that faith, that they would basically abstain from it. In the third one, al-ihsanu ila al-ittiqa. So they basically had lived to the level where they were fully committed and basically used their best performance in applying the rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, let's see right there. The second one, اتقوا قبل التحريم في غيرها من المحرمات. So we're speaking about having the taqwa, okay? Having the taqwa basically before, this was a second opinion. Having the taqwa before it was finally regarded as, remember, because some people were being committed and they left alcohol drinking just when the ayah was revealed, إثمهما أكبر من نفعهما, that the harm in it is bigger than the benefit. And some people, some of the Sahaba were committed to it and left drinking way before others. So some scholars had said, well, what this is involving is praising those that took that commitment before it was finally revealed that it was haram. So it was basically praising those people. So تَقَوْا بَعْدَ تَحْرِيمِهَا. And then those people that later were committed after this ayah was revealed, فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ, they basically had taken, I guess, a second position, a second rank, a second level of their taqwa right there. And then, of course, they would stay committed for the rest of their life. They would basically be considered included, I guess, within this one. So this one, اتقوا وآمنوا, according to that tafsir, اتقوا وآمنوا is to mean whether, of course, he's basically laying out the different opinions of what the scholars had said that this was involving. So the first opinion basically said faith and believing that it's haram, and took the baby steps to basically avoid it. And then the second one, no, this person was committed and faithful. And the third one, that this person was committed, consistent, and certainly embraced it entirely. Okay, the second interpretation, they basically said that no, this is actually, well, not no, objecting, but I guess a different interpretation. They said ittaqaw wa amanu is involving those that had embraced the ruling to not drink, okay, when yet it was not fully revealed that it was haram. So, and then basically those that had later, when it said فَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُنْتَهُونَ, later they basically believed that, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the final revelation that it was haram. So they basically had that consistency, that commitment right there to embrace this part of the ayah. And then those that basically were committed for the rest of their life. So that's basically right there. Okay, so the third interpretation basically said, so ittaqaw, this one is to mean that they avoided shirk. And the second taqwa, it basically said they avoided, so we're talking about now this taqwa. So this taqwa, in third interpretation, they said this taqwa is to mean that they had the religious integrity to avoid shirk. This taqwa is basically speaking about those that were committed in avoiding major sins. And the third one, which basically this taqwa, is that they would avoid the minor sins. So now you could see the different interpretations to what really is this referring to? Is this can it be referring to all three, basically? Well, the answer is yes, and even more. But of course, you just need to keep in mind that there are different inspirations that you would find in tafsir. Okay, let's see. Muhammad ibn Jarir. Who's Muhammad ibn Jarir? Muhammad ibn Jarir is basically Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, one of the most important scholars of Lugha Arabiya and tafsir. And his tafsir is probably the best tafsir ever. And the reason for that, so why are we not studying that tafsir instead of this tafsir? Well, the reason why I'm not studying that tafsir is probably going to be too advanced for the majority, because it's going to be getting into a lot of the different narrations and so forth. And definitely that's going to be I guess, too advanced for us to study. So I wanted to take something a little advanced, but not too advanced. So yeah, let's see. So Muhammad ibn Jarir Tabari, he said, well, the first one is that the person is basically embracing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had considered as the ruling, and that's al-qabul. And that's taking us into, listen to this, the first story that we started our class with, that sister that was a revert, struggling, what am I going to do in my marriage? I want to be Muslim, but my husband is not Muslim. What am I going to be doing? And that's the first taqwa. The first taqwa, just accept that. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. That's the first level of iman. The first level of iman, just understand and embrace, well, that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ruling. I'm not going to reject it. I recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the creator. He's basically giving me the tools to help me maintain my faith. I'm not yet ready to probably practice it in the second level, but I'm still taking at least the first step to embracing that. Okay. The second taqwa is al-ittiqa bil-thabat. Is basically to embrace this level, which is being steadfast and applying applying the level the rulings if you're capable of doing so, of course. But this second level of taqwa, where the person is actually putting it into application, the person is implementing it in their life. The third level of taqwa is that no, the person they had gone way past that, and now they're actually going into, I guess, extra good deeds. They're embracing more and more to go up their spiritual elevators. Okay, that takes us to square one. So many times, we would just have to say, well, we're right now probably embracing the first taqwa and amanu. So that's right now probably going to be the focus for many, is just recognize and just learn more about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and, just embrace that. Perhaps you're not at the second step in considering embracing it and implementing it entirely, but let's actually start with taking those steps one at a time until, inshallah, we would basically go up to the level of al-ihsan. This is what we'll end with, inshallah, for today, because I got to do a bunch of things. But inshallah, we will see you all tomorrow, hopefully. I don't know if I'm going to get carried away with some things, but just a note, I will try, inshallah, to make and be committed to our class tomorrow. Go ahead, Sister Umayyah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yeah, you mentioned here at the point, where is it?
You want to ask about, I know what you want to ask about. You want to ask about this one, right?
Which
this
number?
So basically, you want to ask about وَأَمَّا النَّيْء مِنْهُ فَحَرَامٌ. This is what you want to ask about.
How do you know that? Mashallah. What's this? Good rabita. Great.
All right. I knew that you were going to get into, it's like, wait a minute. So if I'm basically going to be eating that, that's because it's, what is nay? Nay is basically saying that it's raw. That what's haram. Let me do this. So this is basically discussing Abu Hanifa's opinion. What I'm going to do, I'm going to do a further review for a primary source for Madhab Hanafi and see whether this is true in the Madhab Hanafi or not. So this is going to be my homework and your homework. Okay? Okay. I'm going to go for a primary source for Madhab Hanafi, and this is a secondary source. I can't use that one.
Yeah, but the exactly point about when it's nay and it's haram to drink it, but it looks like in Nabi, the Prophet ﷺ, they used to put soak the date in a water or in a milk. Then in the morning he drink it. This is the Nabi. But
so no, this isn't. Yeah. So if it didn't ferment and you let it soak, as let's say you soaked it for a day or two, that's not haram. Okay.
Yeah, it depends upon the time. They
right. Right. It's not haram. Okay. But let me, like I said, I'm going to go to a primary source for Madhab Hanafi and see if this is at all true and see what they really meant by that point. So just give me some time and inshallah, we'll further investigate in this one, but from a primary source for Madhab Hanafi. So yeah, I recognize, that point. I'm like, I'm going to go back to it. All right. And inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilaik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant.